Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Hangman's Record. My name is Steve Fielding. All the stories are taken from my 3-volume series of books, The Hangman's Record, covering every execution in Great Britain and Ireland between 1868 and 1964. Copies of these and many of my other titles can be obtained through my website, stevefielding.com. If you enjoy the video, can you please press like and subscribe to the channel? And if you can spare £1 or £2 to help it to continue to grow by clicking the thanks button on the YouTube video or the link paypal.me/thehangmansrecord, that will be greatly appreciated. And, as always, use the comments below for your thoughts on the case, whether justice was seen to be done, and suggestions for future episodes in this series. It was the autumn of 1920. The Great War had ended less than 2 years before, but its grim shadow still hung heavily across the land. David Lloyd George was the Prime Minister, leading a coalition government from Downing Street. And in the United States, Woodrow Wilson was reaching the end of his second term in the White House. Society was changing. Millions of men had returned from the battlefields of France, many wounded in body or mind, only to find that the land fit for heroes was not quite the utopia they had been promised. Women who worked in munitions and engineering factories during the war were now expected to hang up their overalls and return to being homemakers. Although the suffragette movement had been gathering pace and had seen the first votes for women 2 years earlier. On the wireless, dance orchestras and vaudeville singers filled the airwaves, and gramophones spun the voices of Al Jolson, Irving Berlin and Enrico Caruso. In the world of entertainment, silent film stars reigned supreme. Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks filled cinemas, while Rudolph Valentino's smouldering Lukes made him the world's first great heartthrob. Although musical was still the most popular form of entertainment, with stars like Vesta Tilley and Mary Lloyd topping the bills, it was now on the decline with the rise of motion pictures, and would soon morph more into review and variety shows. The Ford Model T remained the most familiar car, but now Austin, Morris and Rover were beginning to offer competition to Britain's motorists. For most, though, a motor car was out of reach, and for the working man, the bicycle remained the most reliable form of transport. It was a world of contrasts: jazz clubs and suffragettes, unemployment and the promise of modernity, alongside the hangover of grief and suffering from the recent war. It was against this backdrop of change and uncertain times, in the quiet Buckinghamshire village of Little Marlow, a drama was about to unfold, a crime that would shock not just the local community, but the whole country. The advert was quite specific. Young ladies, not under 16, must be over 5 feet 6 inches tall, well built, full figure or slim build. Applicants below height specified, please state qualifications as to appearance, etc. Required for highly paid specialist work indoors or out. Applications from all classes entertained, as duties will be taught. Write in the first instance to Snap, Free Press Office, Wickham. 33-year-old George Arthur Bailey lived with his 22-year-old wife Kate and their 2-year-old daughter at Milford, a small cottage on Furlong Road, Bourne End, a few miles south of High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, in the home counties. In the years after the Great War, it was a small, quiet, quaint, typical English village situated on the River Thames and where everybody knew the happy-go-lucky Bailey. Known locally as the Musical Milkman, he was an accomplished musician who would have a ready smile on his face as he whistled and serenaded customers with a song as he went about his milk round. With an eye on the local young ladies, the milkman had become the subject of village gossip, particularly on how, while earning just £3 a week, he was able to afford to spend a significant chunk of this income on renting another property, Burn Cottage, at nearby Little Marlow. Between June and August 1920, Bailey placed a number of adverts in local newspapers under a variety of nicknames and aliases such as Tremaine and Traherne. Soon the replies began to arrive, with many of the young girls sending photographs. Wading through the applicants, one who Bailey selected for interview was 16-year-old Lillian Victoria Marks from nearby Wickham. She was invited to the house at Bourne End, where she met Bailey and his wife. He told her he had invented a new system of singing that was going to revolutionise the world of music, and that he planned to open a musical academy in Little Marlow. His new theories, he explained, meant that any key selected would mirror that of C major, with 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, and a half step. This simply meant that in each key, like in C major, there would be no flats or sharps, which he claimed would create a new and distinctive sound. Lily Marks had been a keen choir singer at school and church and was impressed by his explanation, quickly telling him she was interested in taking the job. Once his wife left them alone, Bailey took the young girl into the dining room where she stood by the piano. He explained that girls who wanted to work for him must have the right physique and asked her to take off her jacket and unbutton her blouse. Bailey said he wanted to examine her stomach muscles to be sure she was physically capable of singing by this new method. Despite the presence of Mrs. Bailey in the house, Lily Marks was reticent, but relented when he told her she would soon be earning 3 guineas a week. Lily removed her jacket, and as she slowly unbuttoned her blouse, noticed that Bailey was scratching his chin, nodding in appreciation, muttering, "Excellent." Then, with her blouse removed, Bailey first pressed the side of his face against her stomach, which he then gently massaged. After a few minutes, he told the young girl she would be suitable, and suggested they go see her parents to assure them that he would look after her while she was in his employment. As they walked to Bourne End railway station, Bailey said he was sure she would enjoy working in Little Marlow. Her parents were impressed by George Bailey, and when he assured them there would be dozens of other girls of a similar age working at the academy, they had no hesitation in agreeing to their daughter accepting the position. In the meantime, Lily Marks quit her job as a shop assistant and on Wednesday the 29th of September 1920 travelled to Little Marlow to begin working for George Bailey. When she arrived at Burn Cottage that morning, she met 2 other young girls, 16-year-old Winifred Field and 15-year-old Gladys Edwards. For several hours, Bailey studied them as he played the piano and they sang along. At lunchtime, along with her baby daughter, Kate Bailey arrived at the cottage and met the other 2 girls. Bailey told Lily that he planned to initially concentrate on her role and that she would need to stay the night. He gave her some money to go to Marlow for lunch, telling the other 2 girls that they would be going home and returning on the following morning. When Lily returned from lunch in the afternoon, Bailey told her that they would not be using the piano anymore, as 2 more young women had just arrived from Scotland and had gone straight up to bed. At around 10 o'clock, Lily was surprised to hear the baby girl begin to cry, and Bailey said he would go and see to her. The crying stopped after a few minutes, and she then heard Bailey go outside the cottage. Joining him on the dimly lit road, Bailey told her the last train was due in and he was going to see if any other girls were coming to join the music school. She joined him on the walk and on reaching the station found there was no new pupils had arrived by train that night. Returning to Burn Cottage, Lily said she would retire, but before she went to her room, Bailey explained that if the child was to cry, he would have to cross through her room to go into the baby's. Surprised by this, she nevertheless undressed and climbed into bed. As she struggled to fall asleep, she began to wonder what had happened to Mrs. Bailey and why she wasn't the one comforting the baby. Then the bedroom door opened. "Have I disturbed you?" Bailey asked as he approached. "What do you want?" she asked, adding that she hadn't heard the baby cry. Bailey seemed agitated, and after mumbling something incoherent, he told her he wanted her to be his mistress. Despite her protests, Bailey continued, "I have come for one thing, and if you can't decide it, I will." Pushing him off, she dashed to the window and attempted to cry for help. Bailey grabbed her again, put his hand around her mouth, and at the same time pushed her against the wall and attempted to force himself upon her. Lily Marks attempted to scream, but Bailey scoffed and claimed that no one would hear her. Then he suddenly stopped, and as she fell back on the bed, he apologised and asked if she would tell anyone what had happened. He then left the room, leaving the frightened young girl shocked at what had happened. In the morning when she came down the stairs, Bailey made no reference to the incident and began talking about the child. He said she was his niece and that his wife, who was unwell, had gone to stay with family in Swindon. He then told Lily he thought she would make a good mother. Winifred Field and Gladys Edwards returned at noon, and Lily Marks took the opportunity to escape, saying she was going to Marlow for lunch. Traumatised by the events of the previous evening, she had decided that despite the promises of a singing career, it was better to walk away and not see George Bailey again. Later that afternoon she returned home and immediately told her parents of the attack. In a rage, her father said he would go and sort George Bailey out, and grabbing his coat, immediately set out for Little Marlow. There was nobody at the house when he arrived, and on the following day he called at High Wycombe Police Station to report the attack. On Saturday morning, the 2nd of October, Superintendent Kirby and Inspector West went to follow up the report, and arriving at Barn Cottage found it empty but with a window open. They climbed inside, and although the table was laid for morning tea, nothing had been touched. Of George Bailey there was no sign, so detectives made a search of the house. In an upstairs room that appeared to be where the baby slept, officers noticed a large bundle under a bed. As they pulled it, a leg appeared. They had discovered the body of Kate Bailey. A local doctor was quickly summoned, and from what appeared to be burning around her lips, he told detectives he suspected Mrs. Bailey had been poisoned. On the following day, Home Office pathologist Dr. Bernard Spilsby performed a post-mortem and confirmed she had been poisoned by prussic acid, also known as hydrogen cyanide. He also stated she had been dead for a few days. Spilsby determined the amount of poison in the body was so great it would have caused an agonising death, and he was certain she would not have administered it herself either deliberately or by accident. Most houses in the countryside kept poison to control rodents, and in Barn Cottage detectives found a bottle of prussic acid. But there was no sign of George Bailey in Little Marlow or at his home in Bourne End. A hunt for the missing milkman was now on. Detectives soon learned that after fleeing the cottage, Bailey had taken his young daughter and left her to be looked after by relatives in Swindon before going on the run. Word reached the police that Bailey had been seen in Reading, and P.C. Poole, the village bobby, who knew the wanted man well, was sent to look for him. Searching the town after closing time, P.C. Poole found Bailey at Reading train station. He initially gave a false name and tried to pretend he didn't know the constable, but Poole knew he had his man, and Bailey was placed under arrest. Taken into custody, he was told he was to be searched, at which point he said he had a few items in his jacket pocket. Asked to empty them, detectives found 4 different types of poison, including opium and another bottle of prussic acid. There was also a telegram intended for Lily Marks, claiming that Mrs. Bailey had died on the 29th of September, and that Bailey and the baby were also dead. He was charged with the murder of his wife Kate and attempted rape of Lily Marks. After over 3 months on remand, George Bailey appeared at Aylesbury Assizes on Thursday the 13th of January 1921 before Mr. Justice McCarty. It was to be the first murder trial on which women sat on the jury, and the judge made it clear from the outset that this was a horrific case of murder, and that while both the defence and prosecution were to conduct themselves in a manner that would not offend the female jurors, nothing should prejudice the defence of the accused. Opening for the Crown, Hugo Young KC began by suggesting a motive. He said that Kate Bailey had been 6 months pregnant, that the accused had wanted rid of his wife. At the beginning of September 1920, Bailey had unsuccessfully tried to buy prussic acid in London. He had then tried again, telling a local chemist in Marlow, who didn't know him as the milkman, that he was a vet and was able to purchase the poison. The drugs ready for collection, on Tuesday the 28th of September. In the company of his wife, Bailey signed the poison register and returned to Little Marlow to await the next young ladies. Explaining to the jury the properties of prussic acid, Young said it tasted like almonds and was probably administered by tea or other liquid to mask its taste. Defence counsel Sinclair Johnson told the court that on the afternoon of Wednesday the 29th of September, after Miss Marks had gone to Barlow, Bailey had found his wife dying on the bed, saying, "I have done it." Wiping tears from his eyes, Bailey said his wife had talked about committing suicide 3 years ago. "I would not let her die." Bailey explained he had put his wife to bed and went into the garden when he heard a dull scream. Returning inside, he claimed he saw his wife with an egg cup in her hand and a bottle of prussic acid on a chair by the bed. Countering this, Mr. Young said, and self-administration would have been unbelievably agonising. He questioned why Bailey had not immediately called the police, a doctor, or even a neighbour if he was concerned for his wife's health. A professor of music was also called, who claimed that Bailey's innovative new music system was useless and would not have worked as he had claimed. In closing, Young told the jury it was clear George Bailey wanted to be free of his wife so he could allow young ladies into his house and indulge himself in his own pleasures. The defence tried to suggest Bailey was insane and had been an inmate in a local asylum 10 years earlier. He had also tried and failed to poison himself on a number of occasions. The defence of insanity was countered by a prison doctor who had examined Bailey prior to the trial and reported that, although he was, in his words, peculiar, he was of sound mind and fit to stand trial. In the judge's summing up on the fourth and final day, he warned the jury that they were not there to reach a verdict on George Bailey's morals, but whether he had intentionally poisoned his wife. After retiring for little more than 30 minutes, the jury believed that he had poisoned his wife and found him guilty as charged. Returned to the condemned cell at Oxford Jail, letters were sent engaging the services of Hangman John Ellis and assistant Edward Taylor. Bailey launched an appeal that was quickly dismissed, although 2 days before the scheduled execution, the Home Office looked again at the case with regards to his insanity claims. They also learned that during the war, Bailey had presented a number of inventions to the War Office, but, like his new musical theory, they were dismissed as useless and unworkable. George Bailey was hanged at Oxford at 8 o'clock on Wednesday the 2nd of March, making the short walk to the gallows bravely and seemingly unconcerned. As a crowd had begun to assemble outside the prison gates before the fateful hour, it was alleged Bailey had put his handkerchief out of the condemned cell window and waved to the crowd. The feeling amongst those present was the prisoner was quite mad. After the execution, it was revealed that after the adverts began to appear in the newspapers, Oxfordshire police had been alerted by one of the editors who believed they were a front to recruit girls for prostitution in London. An undercover officer watched Burn Cottage for over a month until the middle of September. In that time, he logged over 30 young women going to the cottage, none older than 18 and some as young as 12 or 13, but the vast majority around the age of 16. Most of the girls stayed for around an hour and left. Since none of the girls or their parents had made any complaints to the police, no action had been taken. On Wednesday the 22nd of September, one very young girl was seen entering the cottage and then, a short time later, leaving quite briskly. The officer followed and, speaking to her, asked her age. She said she was 13 years old. He asked what had happened inside the cottage and she told him when Bailey asked her age, she had admitted she was 13. He said she was too young to work and must go home. Following this, the detective reported back to his superiors and, agreeing there was no evidence to make a case against Bailey, the surveillance was stopped. 7 days later, Kate Bailey was murdered. There was no doubt George Bailey was guilty as charged, and his defence of insanity was given short shrift in court. It was clear the 33-year-old milkman had a penchant for young girls, and nowadays would be labelled a groomer and even a paedophile. He was also something of a rare bird in the annals of 20th century British true crime, being one of less than a dozen men to go to the gallows on murder by poisoning, a crime more associated with the female murderer. You'll be watching another episode of Tales from the Hangman's Record. If you've enjoyed this presentation, please press like and subscribe to the channel if you don't already, as this helps the video to be seen by a wider audience. So, until the next time, thank you and goodbye.